Hello and welcome. My name is Dan Sheeran. I'm the Industry Director for Healthcare and Life Sciences at Amazon Web Services. I'm joined today by Rowena Yeo, the Chief Technology Officer of Johnson & Johnson, to chat with you about Johnson & Johnson's cloud journey. Now, before we get started, I'm going to share just a few observations about the main things that our largest customers often ask AWS to help them with, challenges that they have been facing all across every part of the enterprise, and how some of those challenges have actually changed during the pandemic. So even before the pandemic, it was common for customers to approach us with needs around making their drug discovery process more data-driven, more actionable, so that assets can be developed faster, molecules can be identified, targets can be identified, and brought to market faster. We've had a lot of customers in recent years ask us to help them apply the same types of lean supply chain and agile supply chain capabilities that Amazon has developed over many years to their own operations so that they have more resilient, more responsive, and lower cost supply chains. A third area where customers, even before the pandemic, were increasingly seeking guidance is in regards to how to transform their commercial operations as it becomes increasingly challenging to gain access to healthcare providers inside many institutions, and as both HCPs and patients really seek a more personalized experience. Many of our IT customers inside of large pharmaceutical companies and even medium-sized companies have also sought our help in transforming how they provide services to their internal stakeholders, to allow their customers to become more self-serve, and especially as it relates to data and access to data and analytics, to become direct users, or what we often call citizen scientists. And then finally, I'd say the most common challenge we really work with all of our customers around is unleashing their data. It's not uncommon for many of our largest customers to have performed multiple acquisitions over many years, the result of which would be silos of data in which their ability to access, discover, make use of the data from all these acquisitions is limited because they're on different platforms. They use different protocols. They have different governance structures. And so we spend a lot of our time helping customers unleash that data by making the data liquid, making it discoverable. And there's been many advances in AWS technologies and those of our partners in the last several years in particular that have helped us address those challenges. But the pandemic really changed many aspects of our conversations with our customers. And what the customers understood is now possible by using cloud technology. In each of the areas that I've already spoken about, we have all seen in the past 18 months really a radical transformation in how life science companies of all sizes have been able to invent new vaccines and therapies, bring them through clinical trials faster, manufacture them at enormous scale, get them through a commercial launch, and then provide the post-market support necessary to ensure that we're tracking the safety and the efficacy of these new vaccines and therapies. This has been an incredible time for us as AWS to work with many of these companies that have been on the forefront of the pandemic. It's been a privilege and an honor to work with them in each of the areas that I've just described. So as I go through the next few parts of the presentation where we talk about how different life science companies and ultimately Johnson & Johnson have been transforming them through the cloud, I'd really like to focus on both what's common and what's changed as we've all learned together through the pandemic. So let's start with discovery. Now, even before COVID, we were all seeing tremendous acceleration in the ability to identify new targets, develop new molecules and biologics, and test them faster by using cloud technologies and data science. What these technologies allow us to do is to de-risk and advance molecules into development faster using on-demand, cost-effective, high-performance computing, as well as machine learning and artificial intelligence. This facilitates secure research collaboration between different departments within one life science company, and increasingly collaboration between life science organizations as well as academic researchers. What that results in is drugs getting to market faster, as well as the ability to not reinvent the wheel because there are other organizations elsewhere that have already done the research that your organization finds necessary for its next stage of the process. Now, one good example of this is the really groundbreaking work that AstraZeneca has been doing for a while now using AWS's SageMaker Ground Truth to label early phase research training data for image detection and recognition using machine learning models. This has reduced the time that they need to spend classifying tissue samples by 50%. Another good example is the work that our partner and customer Numerate has been doing using AWS HPC for machine learning modeling that allows them to expedite candidate discovery by 5x while reducing costs by 10x compared to using on-premises HPC infrastructure. A second example of how customers have been using cloud technologies and data science to accelerate drug discovery and development really applies to clinical trials. Now, clinical trials is probably the single most important area of advancement that we've all seen together during the pandemic. Every aspect of the clinical trials process needed to be accelerated to get these vaccines and therapies into trials, through trials, and then submitted to regulators for approval. Everything from site selection to study design to patient recruitment to data collection and analysis, and then ultimately data submission to the regulators. And as a result of the tremendous progress that so many companies have made in collapsing that process from 5 to 7 or 8 years down to under 1 year, really all of our customers are now focused on how do I apply the learnings from COVID to my post-COVID operations? How do I make faster clinical trials the new normal? As a result of that, we spend a lot of time with customers on new concepts like decentralized clinical trials, and that's allowing us to also accelerate pre-existing desires for systems like synthetic clinical trials, in which our customers are able to discover new indications and applications for drugs that are already on the market, and allowing not only a greater return on their investment, but more access to life-saving therapies for patients and providers. So we're extremely focused at AWS on continuing to accelerate clinical trials through the use of cloud technologies and data science. Now, a couple of good examples of companies that are at the forefront of doing this would be one company is called Umotive, which has been using secure mobile data to collect clinical trial data on 13,000 patients and over 30 million data points just using their mobile device. Now, what that allows is the ability to estimate what's happening with that patient and that patient's experience of the therapy in the clinical trial without having to collect all of that during a live session with an investigator during the clinical trial. So it allows much richer information as well as a better consumer experience, the type of thing that we're trying to make more standardized now through decentralized clinical trials. A second example I'd like to share is Knowledgeant, which is part of Accenture. Now, Knowledgeant has been able to cut clinical trial costs by 20% by eliminating poor trial sites using machine learning running on AWS. This is an area that many of our customers are quite focused on doing as they gain more competency in machine learning, and they learn how machine learning can help them make decisions that previously would have taken a much longer period of time, and oftentimes failures in the field because they did not have sufficient data and insights before they had access to machine learning. Yet another incredibly important area of the life science value chain that was already of importance to our customers, but became drastically more so during the pandemic, is life science manufacturing. Think about the situation we've all been in, but especially our customers have been in, as they've gotten these new drugs and vaccines approved on short notice, but then all of a sudden have the need to make over 1 billion doses in perhaps 1 year. This presents challenges in supply chain and manufacturing that nobody has ever had to face before, and frankly, most of us did not anticipate would actually ever be necessary. Fortunately, many of our customers have been able to access technologies that allow the scale-up of manufacturing in manners that were not previously expected. And not only has this helped during the pandemic, but it's also helping our customers increasingly be ready for the world that has been evolving anyway, with the move from blockbuster medications to specialty therapies, and then ultimately personalized medications, including batch of one through therapies such as CAR T. We had been working with multiple customers in these areas before the pandemic, but many of the technologies and methodologies that we've helped customers adopt during the pandemic really are laying the foundation for acceleration across multiple different classes of therapies, therapeutic areas now, as they're applying those learnings to the rest of their operations. So a couple of examples of companies that are really at the forefront here. Of course, Moderna is a pretty well-known company at this point, and it's quite an unusual company to be at the scale that they are as what we call a born in the cloud life science company, where they built their infrastructure on the cloud from the beginning. And they have regularly shared that this is one of the reasons why they had the agility to not only iterate in the development process, but then also scale up the manufacturing as they needed to make over 1 billion doses after their vaccine had been developed and succeeded in clinical trials. Now, that was done because they use a tremendous amount of machine learning built on AWS to optimize their batch sizes and to replicate their manufacturing globally. They can also now use those same approaches to make personalized cancer vaccines in under 30 days. The second example is our customer Novo Nordisk. Now, Novo Nordisk has been applying AWS technologies to their manufacturing for quite a while and has become quite sophisticated in doing predictive maintenance using machine learning from AWS, which has allowed them to improve their operational efficiency by 10%. Now, 10% may not sound like a huge improvement, but of course, those of you who are in the supply chain and operations and manufacturing parts of the enterprise recognize that 10% is really quite a very significant improvement, especially given the cost of capital involved. And of course, the supply chain challenges we all face today. Eking out an extra 10% can be the difference between having supply for a given country of a given therapy or not having it, particularly when it's been so hard to accurately predict demand in today's environment and to deal with all the supply chain challenges. I'm now going to spend a few minutes talking about both the challenges that customers were asking us to help them with before COVID in the commercial area and how some of those challenges have changed because of the pandemic. As I mentioned before, there's a long-standing trend within life sciences towards personalized medicine. This is largely driven by the genomics revolution, where it's possible now to perform a genomic analysis of a patient's tumor and then develop a medication specifically designed to attack that specific patient's tumor. And this applies to areas beyond cancer, but that's the one, of course, that's top of mind for many people and an area of enormous investment by many of our customers. Now, even before COVID, it was common for customers to approach us and ask, can you help us figure out how we're going to get these therapies to the right patients? Because the life science companies that manufacture these therapies, of course, are not in the facility. This is very challenging because they need to provide tools to the healthcare providers that are treating the patients to make it easy for the providers to identify which patient is going to be a good candidate for which therapy. Especially when that therapy is designed just for a single patient, getting that analysis right is absolutely essential. Now, one of our customers, Roche, has developed a platform called Navify that uses Amazon technologies for exactly this problem. It's developed a digital diagnostic tool to match the patient's tumor type so that the oncology team members can more quickly select the right therapy, and it's all built on AWS. A second area in the commercial domain that was already an urgent priority for our customers before COVID was to transform how their interactions with healthcare providers can become more efficient, more scalable, and more personalized. Now, this is incredibly important because healthcare institutions are increasingly restricting access to healthcare providers, and because healthcare providers have less time than ever for their interactions with anybody other than patients. Well, and unfortunately, even their interactions with patients are more and more time compressed. But for all of these reasons, it's super important for our customers to help their sales teams be as efficient as possible. That means knowing which providers to call on, when to call on them, and with what message to call on them. So a number of our customers are now using AWS machine learning technologies, principally SageMaker, to create machine learning models that can accurately predict which doctors the sales team should visit to maximize sales force effectiveness, oftentimes using what's called next best action methodologies. As I said, this was a very high priority for our customers even before the pandemic. But of course, during the pandemic, it's become essential for the reps to be able to use these technologies, not just to know which providers to contact, but to then also be able to contact them remotely. Many of our customers, therefore, have been beginning to use technologies like Amazon Chime and Amazon Connect in order to have high-quality, personalized, but remote interactions with healthcare providers. And we have many partners who've used AWS to build their own solutions for those remote interactions. It's going to be fascinating to see how much of those approaches sustain as we move beyond the pandemic in the coming years. A critical area for many of our customers has been how to provide support to patients once a therapy has already been prescribed. Now, this is a change for many of our customers from traditional models of distributing their therapies into the healthcare environment and then really leaving the relationship up to the provider and the provider organization, and in some cases, the payer. Our customers in life sciences are increasingly focused on having both direct relationships with patients to make sure they're successful with their therapies and integrated relationships with the provider and the patient to make sure that the provider is as equipped as possible in making sure that patient becomes successful. But in order to accomplish either of these, our customers need to securely organize very large volumes of data about what's happening in the real world with the patient's experience of a given therapy or device. And that's called real-world data or real-world evidence. Now, securely pooling and organizing the large volumes of real-world data that are distributed across disparate data sources is a major challenge for most of our customers. But using our data lake technologies, our analytics, and our machine learning technologies, we've been able to help many customers improve their patient engagement with personalization mechanisms and with secure, low latency digital therapeutics, many of which leverage the global footprint of AWS. Now, what are the impacts of this for life science organizations? First, it increases their market access. Second, it enables them to more quickly detect and report adverse events. Third, it makes possible digital feedback loops that drive better adherence and lifestyle changes for the patients as they get feedback on how their health is changing based on both their behaviors and their adherence to the therapy. And finally, it makes possible personalized prediction of health events, which is often done using machine learning. Now, Propeller Health is a great example of a company using machine learning to predict health outcomes. Propeller Health is focused on using machine learning to benefit patients with asthma and COPD, and has used AWS technologies to actually develop personalized algorithms to predict the likelihood that certain air conditions will impact this particular person in a certain way so that they can take precautionary measures both with their medication and with their exposure to the air outside. Another good example of a company that is using AWS for real-world evidence is Merck in their use of the Converge Health platform from Deloitte. Now, Converge Health is used by many pharmaceutical companies to simplify the collection and use of real-world evidence to help them identify unmet needs and accelerate adverse events reporting. We've been delighted to work with Deloitte on behalf of many of our customers and are seeing their use of real-world evidence accelerate not just for adverse events reporting, but for many other use cases, particularly during the pandemic. So that was a survey of many of the challenges that our life science customers are facing increasingly during the pandemic, in that they're using AWS technologies in cloud and data science to help them. I'd now like to talk about some of the core technologies that make much of that possible. And I'm speaking about SAP. As you likely know, SAP is a core system that almost all life science companies use to make everything that they're doing possible, and particularly around their operations, their finance, and their core inventory tracking systems to create the agility and inventory flexibility that I talked about earlier. So during the pandemic, as you can imagine, we've had quite a lot of conversations with SAP and with our customers about accelerating customers' journey to cloud for SAP. Now, when we talk to our customers about SAP, there's a handful of things that we hear over and over again. The first is about innovation. Customers want to innovate around their core lines of business, but they want to do it in a way that is not introducing risk to mission-critical operations. And as we all know, there are many aspects of the life science enterprise that require not only that are mission-critical operations, but highly regulated environments. And so customers need to make their cloud journey in a manner that is maintaining their current operations from a compliance standpoint and a risk mitigation standpoint. There's also the looming end of support for SAP ECC. While many customers have already moved to S/4HANA, the majority are still on ECC and need to figure out how they will navigate this transition over the next 5 or so years. And then finally, our customers are really seeking to get more value from their data, as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk. There's the data silo challenges I've been talking about, and traditionally, customers have had challenges getting their data out of SAP or combining their SAP data with data from other sources across the enterprise. We've been working backwards from these types of customer challenges since 2008, when SAP started using AWS to support their own innovation journey. Over the 13-year journey, we have consistently led the innovation cycles for SAP in the cloud. In fact, we were the first company to support SAP as a customer. In November 2007, SAP needed a way to be more nimble. Some SAP employees had recently listened to Werner Vogels, Amazon CTO, at a startup conference where he spoke of the Amazon cloud and provisioning servers on demand. By early 2008, an innovation team at SAP had created a self-service model where developers could provision AWS infrastructure for dev and test, and AWS officially became the first cloud provider to host an SAP workload. At the time, Azure did not even exist, and Google Cloud was still in preview. We've been the first to certify infrastructure for production workloads for SAP, and AWS customers have continued to ask about running SAP in the cloud. So we partnered. Today, more than 5,000 active AWS customers run SAP on AWS. And when we look at the life sciences industry in particular, we have many SAP customers. I want to talk briefly about some recent life science customer outcomes with SAP and AWS. As I mentioned earlier, Moderna first shared their AWS implementations from the beginning of their use of their development as a company. Now, they started sharing their AWS story back in 2007 when they did a case study talking about the advantages of scalable computing and native AWS innovation and how it was helping them meet complex GxP compliance requirements, and ultimately how it would help them bring clinical-grade mRNA therapeutics and vaccines to market. Well, today, Moderna uses S/4HANA on AWS as a cornerstone of their ecosystem, which then uses AWS services to connect with manufacturing instruments, robotics, and other integral systems. They have IoT-enabled manufacturing facilities, which improve their overall efficiency, and their digital manufacturing model can be copied to leverage partner production facilities, which will allow them to massively scale the COVID-19 vaccine for massive distribution. To do this, they've leveraged AWS professional services and an SAP partner, AnswerThink, to set up their systems with infrastructure as code, as well as make them highly available and rapidly scalable. Now I'd like to introduce one of the leading customers implementing SAP S/4, which also happens to be one of AWS's largest healthcare and life science customers, and a company we've been proud to serve since 2010. I'm speaking, of course, of Johnson & Johnson. The many innovation and business outcomes for our work with Johnson & Johnson has been shared during past reInvents, and this year brings the opportunity to do so once again. So our next speaker will be Rowena Yeo, Chief Technology Officer and Global Vice President of Technology Services at Johnson & Johnson. I've had the pleasure of working with Rowena for the past several years and found her to be an experienced technology executive, conversant across multiple industries, with the demonstrated ability to lead her global team to enable the operations, digital, and data imperatives of her diverse business partners to deliver best-in-class healthcare products and solutions to market. With that, I will now hand it over to Rowena to share Johnson & Johnson's cloud transformation journey with AWS.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rowena Yeo, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Johnson & Johnson. It is my pleasure to be speaking to you today about our cloud journey and how AWS has helped enable that journey. Before I talk more about that, I want to first share some background on Johnson & Johnson to help you better understand the vastness of our business and our global impact. Johnson & Johnson is one of the world's largest and most comprehensive healthcare company. And Johnson & Johnson has reimagined health and well-being for more than 130 years to serve patients, doctors and nurses, mothers and fathers, and all others who use our products and services. The stats that you see on the screen provide just a glimpse into our footprint and the impact we have across the globe. J&J is made up of 250 companies with 135,000 employees, and through them, we touch more than 1 billion lives daily. Our diverse set of products and services span consumer products, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices, providing products for all stages of life. And since our founding, J&J has used technology of the times to advance health around the world. And in parallel, the use of technology has continued to shape, change, and transform our company to ensure that we deliver on the most urgent health needs of the society. And it is a combination of technology and life sciences that brings J&J's transformational products and programs to market. So to enable all of that, we have developed our Johnson & Johnson technology strategy. We understood that we must move decisively to deliver better products for our patients and consumers, better experiences for our employees, and greater value for our businesses. And to do this, we prioritize 3 strategic areas of focus which we deliver on our vision. Number 1 is to modernize our technology ecosystem by simplifying and strengthening our technology stack. We need also to operate as a digital organization, which means we want to attract the best talent, build future-ready skill sets, and leadership needed for now and the future. And it's so important for us also as a team to accelerate business outcomes by ensuring that we are aligned with our business partners on the outcomes that really matter and deliver against those priorities. And as we talk about in the modernization of our foundation, cloud transformation is a big part of our journey. When we look at our cloud journey we are on and why it is critical to transform and modernize our strategy, we focus on the core needs and trends of our diverse businesses while anticipating future needs to ensure that we stay on pace or ahead of our business. Business agility, security, and resiliency is critical. We are faced with a rapidly changing industry, complex global footprint, and the complexity and diverse needs of our business really requires fit-for-purpose, cloud-enabled capabilities that are secure, compliant, and resilient. Our global cloud footprint requires the flexibility to meet specific regulations, requirements for certain countries, and as we serve 3 different sectors at J&J, each come with their own diverse data and platform needs, as well as compliance and regulation rules. Now, public cloud global footprint with multi-region, multi-zone technology helps solve for our complex business continuity and resiliency scenarios, and also help reduce our data center footprint and related cost. Security, like most of you, is of utmost importance to J&J, and with that, advancements in the public cloud security and compliance certifications at the platform level help provide a secure and compliant framework. With our ERP consolidation and modernization, J&J continues to acquire, merge, and divest companies, and supply chain today has to use data across 60-plus ERP systems, and this creates another level of complexity and cost for us. Long-term, this is not sustainable, especially with legacy and siloed systems that we have, and this really requires us to modernize across our landscape. So we set forth to modernize this complex environment by consolidating our ERPs, where cloud elasticity and modernization is a must-have, and I'll share more of that later in the presentation. In the space of data, we have seen a huge exponential growth in this space. Our business strategies are driving the growth of our data footprint at about 30% every year. And this is not only just increasing in volume, but also complexity and diversity. We're also seeing our compute needs growing at 20% year on year. And this is driven by key strategic initiatives in digital surgery, in R&D, and in the way we engage with consumer. And in the past several years, we have also seen increasing importance of data and data science as an enterprise asset. And with this exponential growth, having an either-or strategy with just a traditional on-premise or private cloud solutions are no longer a viable one. In the digital space, we have seen acceleration of data science, exponential growth of data. We're also seeing increased adoption of advanced digital capabilities like artificial intelligence, real-time analytics, and IoT across our businesses, which require fail-fast experimentation to drive innovation. To enable or accelerate these capabilities, we really needed cloud-based capabilities and innovation like edge computing, providing cloud-in-the-box model to solve for real-time AI and ML-based actions at the edge. And I'll next share the approach to our J&J cloud journey as we transform in this space. Our cloud transformation was a journey and is still a journey for us, as I mentioned, and our approach has been iterative to ensure that we are leveraging new innovation, particularly from our critical partners like AWS. We started off with enabling our own private cloud and shifting from physical on-premise to flexible infrastructure, virtual infrastructure to improve our reliability and time to market. With the growth of public cloud capabilities and the increasing innovation, reliability, and security in this space, we embarked on a hybrid cloud strategy, which enabled us to leverage the cloud, the data storage and compute from both the public cloud providers like AWS, while also leveraging our on-premise data centers as needed, especially where data locality is key. Through our hybrid cloud approach, we focus on deploying public cloud capabilities, particularly from AWS, leveraging the scale, the flexibility, and innovation as appropriate, depending on our business needs. And our hybrid cloud approach allows us to use a fit-for-purpose approach, which is really critical for the diverse business needs in J&J, and leverage the strength of public clouds and on-premise infrastructure services. And we enable some of these core cloud capabilities and services. We have also focused on platform engineering with patterns supported by reference architecture to deliver cloud capabilities for rapid consumption, driving productivity, better user experience, and ultimately faster time to market. And critical to our approach is the use of automation, standardization, and also reducing complexity to enable operational excellence and to build a reliable, resilient, secure environment for our business to operate in a compliant manner. And as you'll hear throughout our presentation, automation is a must-do for us. The other area that is really important is our people, and our teams are foundational for us to enable our strategy. And focusing on talent and reskilling of our talent is critical. We needed to shift our talent from mainly managing data centers to having cloud engineering, operations, automation capabilities, and this required a very thoughtful and proactive training approach. And we do this through structured courses we developed, as well as in partnership with AWS, and also providing our teams with hands-on exposure. Our shift to consumption-based cloud cost or usage-based billing was also a big change from how we financially manage our hosting costs in the past. And to effectively manage this, we put a lot of discipline around providing visibility to cloud usage for our business, establish governance, and also providing financial transparency and helping our business see cost optimization levers to really effectively manage our cost. So let's talk about modernizing our global ERP landscape to SAP S/4HANA. I broadly spoke about our cloud transformation, and as we think about this specific use case, I'll share a little bit of the background that we have today. As mentioned earlier on, we have about 63 ERPs within our J&J environment without unified visibility. We are seeing aging legacy systems that are incompatible with the digital capabilities we want to enable, and systems losing support over time. And modernizing our ERP landscape and consolidating our 63 ERPs to 4 global SAP S/4HANA systems serve as a foundation for our supply chain digital transformation and the core foundation for delivering our medicine and life-saving products globally. With our modernization, we needed to enable some critical capabilities. One is around having a common data layer with a single point of access to accurately and timely data across our global supply chain. Interoperability between software as a service platforms and microservices, including IoT, common data layer, and next generation shop floor systems. Having a standard single core that's always on across our business, and touchless supply chain where we require little to no human intervention by embedding AI and machine learning to automate processes. With that, we're expecting some impactful benefits to our companies, and this include driving efficiencies and increasing employee productivity through intelligent automation and reducing manual effort. Reducing year-on-year investments in technology for new business functions and reducing our technical debt. And also overall driving increases in revenue margins and profitability through order fulfillment, inventory, and manufacturing yield. As we continue our SAP Cloud migration journey, Consolidating the 60 ERP systems across a complicated and large global footprint to only 4 SAP S/4HANA systems created some of the most complex problems, and this required the right architecture, cloud elasticity, and hosting partners like AWS. And as we are preparing for our migration journey, there are some key factors we considered to ensure reliability, scalability, and cost optimization. As business units are now relying on a single SAP S/4HANA versus their own localized ERP system, outages and unplanned downtime are no longer acceptable and can be immensely disruptive. And this requires having high availability on the cloud, along with disaster recovery plans. And AWS become a critical partner in ensuring high availability with a large global cloud footprint. Near zero downtime was a must-do as a part of our migration journey because negotiating downtime across different business units was no longer viable and required the right architecture and technical solutions to ensure this. As mentioned before, our businesses are changing rapidly, and our diversity within J&J requires our technology and infrastructure to be able to respond and adapt very quickly. It is critical that we have a partner like AWS with a broad set of capabilities to enable the flexibility, agility, and the choice we require. And as we make a fundamental shift towards designing for consumption versus designing for capacity with our move to the cloud, before our migration to the cloud, we used to buy physical servers. We now need to optimize our usage to manage consumption, which requires flexible provisioning and real-time capacity adjustments. So what are some of the lessons we have learned on this journey? Both our cloud transformation and ERP modernization are an ongoing journey, and we have learned a lot along the way. I'll highlight a few key learnings and lessons we have learned so far. One of them is, besides the large change management needed with major ERP implementation, it is also really important to set realistic expectations with our business and technical partners early on as essential, as well as aligning on the critical needs and the corresponding solutions. For instance, cost, performance, and seamless integration may not be as straightforward as initially thought. And as we learned that in some cases, cloud is not always cheaper, and integrating services with other products are not always seamless. And besides having the right technical architecture up front, we need to have transparent conversations with our partners early on and to make sure that we're setting the right expectations in terms of cost and value. The other lesson we have learned is that automation is a must-do and foundational to our cloud strategy, and this is so important to ensure sustainability, scalability, and reliability, as well as driving efficiency, especially as we further scale our cloud transformation. User experience is also something we cannot neglect, and this is to ensure that we are accounting for the needs of all our users. And for instance, we are dealing with some users experiencing slow transactional times, and this depends on where they are in the world. And to mitigate this, we needed to include the requirement that our ERPs have sub-zero performance with some of our next-generation manufacturing systems. To prevent feature chasing, it's also important to align with your cloud providers and with their roadmap on our anticipated need. And it will help save time and reduce churn. And it has been a critical factor with our partnership with AWS to ensure that we discuss anticipated future needs and partner together with them to deliver them. Change management and upskilling of our resources have also been foundational to our SAP and cloud journey. And our cloud and SAP transformation requires a shift in mindsets, changes in roles and responsibility, and also the need to work as a single team and engaging differently with our partners. And finally, our transition to the cloud also have shifted the way we manage financials, from largely capital expense to operational expense. In addition, as I mentioned in our SAP journey, managing consumption needs to be a design consideration, and it is important to have the transparency into cost and usage so as to optimize our environment. So what is next for J&J Cloud Transformation? In our cloud transformation, we have focused a lot on ensuring that the foundational cloud capabilities and operations are in place, and by partnering with essential partners like AWS and focusing on platform engineering and automation. And with this, we now have greater flexibility, lower costs, and improved security and compliance, and we can better respond to changing business models in a responsive and iterative manner. And this really helps promote innovation and drive business value. As a next step of our cloud transformation, we are going to be focusing on driving business and technology modernization with cloud-native capabilities, modernizing our edge, and leverage capabilities from AWS to drive real-time insights in our labs, manufacturing, and warehouses. It's also important for us to drive data science and AI at scale, and also to continue to accelerate innovative capabilities with a focus on automation to support our global digital enterprise. Our transition to the cloud continues to be a journey, and we are seeing firsthand the value it's delivering. So I hope you found this presentation insightful and that it helps you and your business on your journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Rowena. And thank all of you for spending time with us today to learn about Johnson & Johnson's journey for cloud transformation.